certification. It's an industry, but there's many like sub-domains inside of it, each with their own specialties. And what's one of the interesting things is, depending on what you're interested in doing, you can be someone that's kind of like a generalist. So you might be someone who does this for contract work or tries to open a side business, and you kind of would want to learn a little bit of everything so you can be independent. Or you might work for a large company where you might be one piece of the larger puzzle, and so having situational awareness of the whole spectrum is useful, but you kind of dive deep into one of the topics. So I kind of break them into 4 different umbrellas under the overarching web design development umbrella. And the first one is design. So this is, and we'll use some analogies coming up in a couple of slides talking about how it's similar to building in a house, but a design is more of it's not the architecture, it's the aesthetics, it's the user experience. We go into color theory and the science of what colors you should use on your site depending on what mood and what you want to portray. We talk about how you manage a project from a project management point of view, understanding personas and use cases and scenarios. And a lot of times people will develop a website as a developer, but they won't really put a lot of time and energy into designing it properly. And I think that's the key concept here is you build it right from the ground up, and then it works towards your goals. So that's what we cover kind of under the design umbrella. Part of design is also making it aesthetically pleasing, and while you can kind of reuse graphics and stuff, there is a component of going to be building your own graphics and images, whether it's a logo or banner ad or just a nice, pleasant, look and feel for your site. So there's a lot of people that learn how to do that. Before, people started doing that in Flash, and now a lot of people will use Adobe Photoshop, and now there's a lot of third-party graphical applications out there that can be used. That's another niche within web design development. They're called typically graphic artists or digital graphic artists. Then there's also obviously the actual coding or development of a website, and that in and of itself even breaks down into different categories where you could have the front end of the website, so you're coding up the look and feel of the website. But if your website's interactive, it has maybe a request for information, maybe it has a digital shopping cart, or some type of information that needs to connect to a database, there's got to be some programming that happens on the back end. So under web design development, you have people who are specialists on what's called client-side programming, and that's typically done with a language called JavaScript. And then you have people who do what's called server-side programming, connecting to the databases and so forth. And there's a lot of technologies you can use for that. One of the common ones, and the one that we teach in this program, is PHP because it's open source. And then the database that we communicate with is MySQL because, again, that's also open source. But potentially there's multiple different competitors to PHP you could look at. And then you could design the site perfectly with really good graphics and have a really core, best practices for development. But that just puts the site together. That doesn't actually deliver and execute the site against its goals. You need to have a proper search engine optimization strategy so you can get found. You need to have good technologies and strategies for internet marketing. How do you use the internet and your website to enhance traffic to your website? What are strategies you can use to drive traffic? Simple ones like create a blog on your site that will give you more traffic to your website are strategies. So all of those fall under a larger umbrella of web design development. And as I said before, you could be a generalist and learn everything, or you could take an overview of all of these and then say, what, I really am leaning towards the marketing side, or I'm really leaning towards doing more visual design. And then dive into those in a little more detail. So those are some of the things we'll talk about. We'll break down each of those buckets, design, graphics, development, marketing, into a couple analogies that we'll show in the next slide as well, the next few slides. So the analogy that I like to use to kind of relate what web design development is to everyone is an analogy of building a house. So I will go through a couple slides where I do an analogy. This is everything you need on a project to build a house, and I'll kind of walk through it, and I'll come back to the exact same step, but then I'll translate and say, okay, this isn't a house, this is a website, and these are how they correlate. And I found using that analogy really helps people understand what those roles and definitions mean to people rather than just explaining them in the terms of a website. So we can go to the next slide. The first thing that we learn about when we look at a a house is typically you're going to go and hire a general contractor. That general contractor is going to be someone that you rely on for the entire house development project. They might not necessarily do all the work, and a lot of times they don't do all the work. They just need to be involved. So they might outsource to third parties. They're also a carpenter, so they do some of the work. But typically they're the one and the only one communicating with the customer, and everything that gets done behind the scenes is done through the general contractor. So they're the owner of the entire project, with the homeowner being their customer, and then they're outsourcing or they're liaisoning with the other parts of the project team that need to go and build the house, like the electrician, the plumber. They work with the town to get the building permits approved. They work with DigSafe and all of the different needs you have for building a house. The first thing they probably do, and this is covered on the next slide, is they probably are going to hire an architect. Obviously, houses have to be structurally sound. They can't just fall down. There needs to be some level of validation or structure built to to the house. And I'm not going to say that it's that intense on a website project, because you could have a website project that's not structurally sound. It just might not work well. Whereas in a house, if you don't have it structurally sound, obviously it's a danger situation. But the architect in a house is responsible for listening to the customer's functional and technical requirements. So they'll sit down with the customer, and they'll probably say, okay, what's the goal of your house? What do you want to do? Okay, is it 1 floor? Is it 2 floors? Do you want to have a patio? What kind of windows do you like? Do you want big windows, small windows? How many bedrooms do you need? Do you have any special circumstances? So if you have a disability, do you need a ramp coming up? Do you need the bathroom to be on the first floor? And that will translate from the customer saying those things into what I call technical requirements. And it's kind of like a blueprint for the house that shows how you'll meet those requirements. Here's how you'll get into the house. Here's where you'll eat. It's technical, but it's also functional. So a technical requirement might be something like you have a bathroom, so you have to have plumbing, and then you have to have some type of septic system or some type of sewer system. Whereas a functional requirement might be, yeah, we need a place to eat, and we have a big family, so we need an eating area that seats 10 people. And then the architect will go and blueprint that and show it to them, and probably go through a couple iterations with them to make sure that all of those technical needs are met. There's windows, there's bathrooms. The architect doesn't actually build anything. They just build the blueprint, and they're going to hand it off to someone. So on the next slide, we say they hand them off to what I would call a builder. Maybe you'll call them a carpenter or similar. But what they will do is they'll take the blueprint, and the idea is that there's a transfer. It's two separate people. They take the blueprint. That gives them everything they need to know to structurally build the house, the angles on the roof, the position of the windows, the positions of the doors, the size of the rooms, the height of the rooms. But they don't do any design work, and they don't do any finish work. So they're not in there trying to decorate the window and say, do you want a shade or a drape? They're not saying, oh, the interior color should be brown or khaki. They're just building the rough structure. They also don't do any of the finish work. They leave all that up for what I would call the next project would be an interior designer, which is covered on the next slide. And that's someone who would come in after the rough is done, and they would actually apply what I would call the mood or the goal of your space. So you would work with this person and understand, okay, do I want a contemporary look? Do I want a colonial look? Do I want a modern look? Do I want a traditional look? What color palette do I want to use? They're not really going over things that are functional. They're going over colors and mood and how to lay things out for the best traffic patterns throughout the house. So where do you put the couch in relation to the TV, in relation to the hallway? You already know structurally where the windows are, but how do you set them up? Do you want to use shades? Do you want to use drapes or similar? And then finally, probably at the same time as the interior designer, you're going to hire someone to do what I call the finish work. And so that's once the structure is built, they actually go ahead and start doing the finish work. So it'll be including things like doors and window treatments and shelves and TVs and carpets. And they're taking a lot of their input from the interior designer, because the interior designer might say, you know, based off what you told me, your kitchen should have mahogany countertops or mahogany cabinets and dark granite counter. It's the finished work people that are going and doing it. They're not deciding by themselves. They're not experts in the design of the site. They're being given, this is the cabinet, this is the granite, this is the paint, this is everything that I need to go and build. And then it doesn't always happen, but there are certain times where you need like just another added bonus or bell and whistle on top of the house, and that's where you would call in an artist. So certain houses might require an artist to do custom artwork. It could be like the example shown on the screen. It could be maybe you want to do a collage in the kids' room that has some type of component to it. Maybe it's a landscape artist outside that does some topiaries or other type of lawn or ornamental stuff. They're not really involved in anything on the structure of the house. They're basically saying, go build this, and they go build it. It's a part of the project, but it's it's kind of an added bonus on top. So having said all of that, what we're going to do now is go through all of those steps and translate it to a web design project. So we started saying, a general contractor is responsible for the whole project. In a website, you have a project manager, which I would say is a synonym to the general contractor. They are responsible for the whole web project. They don't do all of the work. They might do a little bit here and there, but they do need to know what's involved. They're the ones communicating to the customer on the timelines, the pricing. They're the ones that are outsourcing or scoping out the development. They build the project plan just like a general contractor does to get the work done for the website. So a project manager kind of needs to understand who to talk to. I mean, if you go to a general contractor and they don't know that they need to hire someone to do framing, or they don't know they need to hire an electrician, it's not that good of a general contractor. So similar to project management, specifically for websites, you're not going to be developing or coding or designing, but you need to know exactly what is involved. So project managers understand the breadth of capabilities without the depth. But then you go to an architect building a house who is, again, the one who is responsible for the blueprints. In a website, we call this person an information architect. So they're responsible for listening to the customer's requirements and turning them into what we would call a website blueprint, which is called an information architecture. It's the wireframe and the skeleton site map for a website. So they would listen to the customer, and they typically do an interview with them and say, what's the goals of your site? Is your site to drive awareness? Is it to sell your product? Is it to sell services? Is it something else? And they would go through a questionnaire, and from that questionnaire, they would come up with technical and functional requirements. So, okay, one of your goals is to sell product. So that means you need an e-commerce engine. That's a technical requirement. One of your goals is to solicit feedback from your customers. Soliciting feedback, that's something that now on the site, you have to have a section where customers can give feedback. So they'll put all that together into what's called an information architecture, and that's, again, how the website is organized as a whole, similar to the architect saying, okay, the 2 bathrooms over here, the kitchen's in the middle, the laundry room's on the corner. The information architect says, okay, the top level, you have the home page, you have the About Us page, you have the services page, and you have the Contact Us page, and under there you have these subsections, and then here's what the wireframe for the site looks like. So they ensure all that works. They don't build or code anything. They just kind of do the blueprint. And I'm going to hand it over to a builder, and the builder falls into that development bucket that we talked about on the first slide. There's going to be client-side developers, and there's going to be server-side developers. There's not really, unfortunately, a good analogy to compare both of those to a builder, so I'll just do them together. Whereas the builder of a house takes the blueprint and they add the structural elements. They don't do any design work or finish work. The client-side developer takes the information architecture and the wireframe is typically done similar to what you'd do with a blueprint. It's done on a sketch pad, or it's done as a PowerPoint. It's like a skeleton structure of the web page. And they would go and build it using HTML and cascading style sheets and JavaScript, which are the client-side languages. Anytime there was any technical or functional requirements for back-end, like a database connection, they would hand over that blueprint to the server-side developer, and that server-side developer would take the technical requirements and build out those components like a database connection using a language like PHP or some of its competitors like Active Server Pages or Java Server Pages or similar. And the project manager oversees all of that. Now, once they've got the blueprint or the wireframe, they've gotten the core development done. It's basically a shell of a web page, and that's where they hand it over to what we call the web designer, similar to an interior designer. They're not going to build the web page. The web page is already built. But what they're going to do is they're going to add in the mood of the site. They're going to pick the color palette. They're going to say, we're going to use shades of green and gray. We're going to use complementary colors. We're going to have this style for our font because it projects elegance, or we're a legal firm and we want to use blue because it's bold, and we want to use Arial font because it portrays stability and power. They'll literally build a presentation that goes over what we call a mood board, everything that you want to feel when you're on the site from an emotions and a mood, and they'll translate that into a web design, giving the developer the colors to use, the images to use, the typography to use. But they won't actually necessarily build much stuff themselves. They're just saying, let's do it here, let's do it there. And just like with an instructional designer, sometimes it's a little bit of trial and error. Maybe we have to move the kitchen table out a little bit. Maybe we have to change the colors of the font slightly to, to make it all work. So a little bit of this is a work in progress. And then finally, in a house, you hand it over to what we call the finished workers that just put the non-structural elements. On a website, I would say the non-structural elements, it's the content, it's the actual text. It's the reason everyone's on the site is to read something or see something. Interesting enough, when you build a website, it's the last point. And you have people that their entire job in big web firms are just called content editors. You might have seen them traditionally before the web working in newspapers as editors or copy editors on a newspaper. They would move, and all they would do is add the copy into the website. And I don't say all they should do, because there's a science to that too. What you see in like a newspaper or a magazine shouldn't be what you see on a web page. A website has different rules and regulations because the resolution's different. The way you scroll is different. The way people's attention spans are different is different. So there's a whole science to structuring content and chunking it. And chunking it is a technical term for how you build content specifically for a website. That would be their job, is to add the content continuously. And then finally, if the customer says, I want a brand new logo and I want this flashy design, you're going to hire someone who's a graphic designer that's going to use a tool like Photoshop to build the amazing image that goes in or on the site as needed. And they kind of, again, all work together under the purview of a project manager. You could take the approach that you want to know a little bit of everything, which a lot of people do, especially when they freelance. But you might say, okay, I'm more of a left-brain person. I'm more into the development, or maybe you say I'm more into the artsy stuff and I want to go down the design or the graphic design route. In the web design field, there's such a big gambit of capabilities and things you can do that you do have the ability to pick and choose specializations. But there's a lot of people that just say, I want to do it all. And that works perfectly fine as well. So what we'll kind of show on the next slide is we'll kind of walk through what I just showed you, but map it to courses that we teach in the program. And although we're showing the courses specifically to this program, just in general, these are the things you would want to do if you're interested in looking at that. So as a project manager, we have a course, Web Design Principles, that teaches you how to interview a customer, how to ask them questions, how to define the goals for the site, how to turn those goals into technical and functional requirements, how to then build user personas, how to build customer scenarios for your site, and then we go into the actual information design. So how do you chunk content for a website? How do you build different user experiences that are specific for the website? You also in that course cover what an architect would do, which is the information architecture for a site. So some of the examples we give in the course is, one of the exercises is we give a bunch of pages that goes on a school website. And in the first week, we ask you to build what you think is the best information architecture for that, something like a sitemap. And all the students share their responses. And there's really no right or wrong answer, specifically because we didn't tell you much about the school. But then we go through some of the weeks and talk about the goals of the site and the technical requirements. And then In the end of the course, we ask you to revisit the information architecture and do it again, but do it assuming now that these are the specific goals of the site. What's interesting is almost every class, whereas let's say you have 10 students, the first time you do the assignment, there's 10 different answers. In the last time you do the assignment, now that you have a clear goal for the site and clear requirements, there's very few differences in the answers, and the places there are differences, it's because it's really subtle. And so it's not just one answer is right, but once you know more about the site, like the goals, it's easier to build an architecture, and that's kind of the point of showing the students kind of the before and the after. For anyone that's interested in kind of the development or the building of the site, whether it be the client side or the server side, for the client side, we have a course called Introduction to HTML, Cascading Style Sheets, and JavaScript Programming, and they're all taught in sequence in a single course to give you that entire client-side development skills. And then if you're interested more in the server-side development, we have a course called PHP and MySQL, which teaches you the server language as well as how to connect to a database. If the topic of interior decoration piqued your interest, again, we would call that person a web designer, and that course that we offer, Web Design Principles, does go into the topic of interior decorating around mood board and building a color theory. We have a week dedicated to color and teach you about the different ways to add color and how do you do complementary colors and what is the meaning of a color based off the type of site you're trying to build. If you're someone that wants to be a finished carpenter, so be given a blueprint and then just put the bells and whistles on top of it, that's similar to what I would call a content editor. You don't need to know a lot about hardcore web programming, but you need to know enough of the markup language, HTML and style sheets, to add in your content. So we recommend you take that course. And then if you're interested in being an artist, a graphic designer, we have a course dedicated to teaching you Photoshop, which is the tool of choice for graphic designers. Now, Photoshop is a software that's not open source, so there is a cost associated with Photoshop in that course. Adobe is the company that makes it. They do provide a 30-day free trial, so if you time the evaluation of that software out properly, you'll get the majority of the course done. They also allow students to rent it for $9 a month. So don't think that this course is out of reach because you have to buy a $2,000 graphical design application. You get a free trial, and you also get a student monthly rate, which you'd only need for one additional month to test out if it interests you. And then if it's something you enjoy from the course, you might be able to go and make a further investment on it. So we can go to the next slide now. And one of the questions that gets asked commonly is, what does an online course consist of? We get a lot of people that join these webinars because they're kind of changing careers, and maybe they haven't been on an online course before. And I think every university does online courses differently, so I'll kind of give you the structure, but then I'll also talk a little bit about the intrinsic value you get from a course here as we teach it. So topics run on a weekly basis. You might have a course that's 5 weeks long. You might have a course that's 7 weeks long. You might have a course that's 8 weeks long. Every week you're going to get reading and videos to watch. So the notes might be notes that I have built and are available for you to download as a PDF. It might be in some courses a chapter from a book. It might be an online article that talks about something as optional reading. And the majority of the weeks, actually, I think every week also has a series of video lectures. Some people learn by reading, some people learn visually, so we like to give you both the reading and the visual component. And the video lectures are usually micro lectures. Some of them are as short as 5 minutes, some of them maybe go to about 30 minutes, so we try to cap it at 30 minutes. And you read those through the week, and then there's discussion forums where you can post questions to the students, other students, or to me. You can ask for clarifications on assignments. There's always availability of office hours, unlike a traditional brick-and-mortar university where the professor might be in their room Monday, Wednesday, Fridays from 11 to 12. I am pretty much always on Skype or Google Hangouts, so you can set up a time where you could just Skype whenever you have questions that you want to say, okay, I can't do this assignment, rather than going back and forth on emails 10 times, let's just set up a Skype meeting. And there's always an assignment to do. That assignment varies depending on the course. If it's a building course. It's a hands-on assignment where you're building a portion of a website. If it's a design course, it might ask you to take information from me, like here's a specific site, here's the goals of a site, recommend a color theory, and explain why. And a lot of times those are shared on the discussion forum for students to benefit from learning from others. That's kind of the nuts and bolts of the course. I think what I'd like to add on top of that is one of the things that is very similar to one of the value adds that we teach is it's very applied. It's not theory-based. So there's a lot of places we will learn the theory of building a website, the theory of programming languages, but it doesn't give examples. All of the exercises that we do are practical, hands-on examples. So it's not what you know, it's what you can do. And there's no quizzes. I put that only because some people get nervous of being able to pass a quiz or know what they need. Everything's hands-on. Everything's real-life examples. So rather than saying, here's a tag, explain what it does, I would say, okay, one of your assignments is to go embed a video in a web page or go embed a form in a web page. I guess the best way to explain it is we're not facilitating as instructors, we're mentoring. We were brought in by the university because we have years of experience, and usually when you learn something as an undergrad, you don't have the life experience to relate things to, whereas a lot of people who take these programs are continuing education. You do have the life experience, so we try to take that to our advantage, and everything ends up being, we're an expert, let's mentor you through real life problems. So there's a lot of times where students will take the gist of an exercise, but we'll let them modify it to be specific to their needs. So maybe they're building a site at work, and we let them use this to redesign their website, so it's something a lot more practical. The other thing that we like to do is we like to kind of approach the difficulty of the course in a kind of a normal distribution. So the course starts out at a very, very basic level where it's just getting started. So the level of effort to learn it is not minimal, but it's low. And then we try to peak it, so the difficulty peaks around midway through the course, and then as the course goes to the end part of the full program, we try to bring the difficulty down again to allow people to catch up from what they've done before. And I found that model works really well rather than having these kind of ups and downs. You kind of know every week you're building to something, and then I'll tell the students very upfront, week 5, this is the summit, this is the hardest week. Once you get through it, it's all easier and easier, and then they can kind of mentally prepare for that. We also don't like to lecture; we like to dialogue, and so questions are encouraged more than anything else. I would appreciate people to ask hundreds of questions rather than none. In fact, if I could figure out a way to grade students based off the amount of questions they'd ask, I would figure out a way that people that ask questions get graded better because. Again, you're using us as subject matter experts. Take advantage of us. You're not going to learn it if you don't understand it and just say, oh, I'm nervous of asking the professor. We're here to answer those questions, so we encourage you to do those. So then you might ask, all right, well, I'm thinking of changing my career, or I'm a freelancer, or I'm thinking, maybe my job wasn't recession-proof, and we see a lot of people moving from print media to digital media. What can I do by going through this certification program? And web design is one of the most recession-proof jobs because everyone needs a website at different levels. So through this program, we've had people that have gotten jobs in graphic design. We've had people that have switched from working to newspapers to working to online magazines and being copy editors. We've had people that have been web design specialists. As I mentioned, you can be a generalist or you can be a specialist in certain things. We've had web programmers, we've had web developers, and I've only listed 6 or 7 here, but there's hundreds of different opportunities for people that understand web. It's a matter of finding out what you're comfortable with, finding out what you like, and then going into it. Now, I can't say that you'll leave the program and you're going to have the equivalent of 10 years of life experience. You're going to understand practical examples, but obviously the more practice you have, the more marketable and the more advanced you'll get in your career. So another reason we like doing applied exercises instead of quizzes is you leave with a portfolio that you can show people, and then some students go above and beyond, and they'll even grow their portfolio as extra credit or other assignments, just so when they go for interviews, they'll have something visible to show to people. So
thank you so much, Kevin.
Sure.
That was awesome, and again, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to shoot them to us now. Kevin is on the line and is excellent at answering questions, as I'm sure you guys have seen. All right, so the PACE course that Kevin is teaching is in our certificate series is the Web Development and Coding Online Certificate. The series begins on June 12th with the Intro to HTML programming course that Kevin covered. As Kevin was kind of walking you guys through, these courses are 100% online and they are instructor-led. The scheduling is flexible, so you're never going to have to be online at any certain point, and that's intended to be designed around working professionals that are trying to gain these additional skills. And you will be guided through the material by Kevin. So the entire certificate costs $2,600, or you can take any of the individual courses a la carte for $650. The whole certificate will earn you 12 continuing education units, so that's about 120 hours of contact time. And as a thank you for joining us today, we do want to offer you a 20% discount off of the course or the certificate if you sign up. And Kevin talked about this a little bit, so Kevin, feel free to jump in with me here, but one of the questions that we ask is who should actually be in this program and who should enroll. We're looking at people who are career switchers, freelancers, marketing communication employees, really anybody who's interested in this program. And Kevin, I don't know if you're able to talk a little bit about what's the skill level expected when somebody starts these courses.
Yeah, great question. So we typically have, because the slide that showed the normal distribution, we start at an introductory level. So we have people that routinely take our programming courses that obviously they've used a computer before, but they don't have any background. So there really is no prerequisite in doing this. The one exception is if you want to go into server-side programming, a lot of that builds off of what you're doing in client-side programming. So we recommend you take the HTML, CSS, JavaScript course before you take the PHP course. But other than that, we've had a lot of students that literally are the career switcher and they've never done it before. Obviously, if you have a logic-based background, maybe not in computer science and math, you would pick things up a lot easier. But the target audience is not someone that has a technical degree. So in that case, those students would be going through the courses a little bit easier and faster, but the target audience is someone that does not have a technical background to start with.
Awesome. And I actually had one more question come in, Kevin. So this student has a background in professional broadcasting. Can you think of a way to cross over to web design? They're most interested in the creative side.
Well, I was going to say a lot of podcasting is creative. I mean, other than building your website for doing online podcasts, I think with the creative side, a lot of that falls under the information architecture, the mood board, the interior designer. I mean, you might not typically think of yourself as an interior designer because it's different when you're building a house. I think that's the thing I should have alluded to before. Don't look at the web design jobs as I compare to the house and say, I'd never be a framer, as an example. They're completely different types of people that do them for websites as opposed to doing them for homes. But I think based off the creativity aspect, you're probably looking more at something that would be on the web design side. The development side, you obviously can be creative, but a lot of times you're being given requirements from someone else and you just go and code it. So you need a little bit more logic as opposed to the creativity and art side, which is similar to what you would do as a web design specialist.
Okay, and so she should be looking more not at the HTML, but more at on that original side that you said, the web design course.
Yeah, I mean, I would start with web design principles and see if it resonates as well. Certainly can't to learn the HTML side. Just again, it's always good to understand the full picture, but given the background, that's probably better suited to go toward like web design principles. Yeah.
Awesome. And then I know you mentioned this, but how self-paced is the course? So if someone's going to be unavailable on 1 week, can they do that assignment in advance, or can they do catch-up at all? I know that you kind of talked about the distribution of work. Is that sort of dependent on when that happens?
Yeah, so a lot of universities are very strict about this. We try not to be, because we realize everyone has a job and families and a life, and things happen. So, we try to say you're going to do your work every week, but if we know you're going to go on overseas travel, or your family gets sick, or you get sick for a week, you just reach out to us and we say no problem, or if you reach out proactively. I have a student this semester that's going to be in Asia, and typically they're based in the U.S. for 2 weeks, and we just gave her the 2 assignments in advance, and she was able to do them remotely and then catch up with any questions at the end. So we're very flexible, because we realize everyone, it's self-paced. The goal of doing self-paced learning like this is to do it when you're motivated, and there might be certain weeks where life happens and you just can't do it. So we have to take that into account.
Yeah, awesome, thank you. And then if a student was interested in doing, say, the web design course, do the courses build on themselves? Would they be required to know HTML and Java, or are the courses able to be standalone if a student is interested in just doing one?
Yeah, great question. We built them by design to be standalone. I guess the only exception is if you're going to take the PHP MySQL course, we'd like you to have a little bit of HTML and JavaScript knowledge, only because some of the times what you're doing on the back end is you're dynamically building a website. So if you have a database that has your clothing inventory, and think of Amazon.com, every time you return a search, it gives you basically an HTML table of all of the search items. Those tables are not, there's not millions of tables out there. It's one that's being dynamically built based off the values of your database. So unless you know the HTML component, you're not going to be able to figure out how to inject that into the PHP. But other than those 2 courses, there's no prerequisite, there's no mandatory order or even recommended order in taking them.
Awesome. And then what's the biggest benefit someone would get from completing the entire certificate rather than just doing a standalone course?
Well, I think it's a big resume builder. As I said, web design is recession-proof, and I think one of the things that we do that's kind of unique here is you obviously have to learn a little bit of theory, but it's practical. So when you leave, it's not that you know how to build a website. It's that you've built a website. That can't be underestimated, because in your job, you're not just going to be answering multiple choice questions. You're going to be building something. So this gives you the hands-on experience to build it, while having access to instructors and mentors to take you along the way. So to answer the question completely, if you're looking at just a web design job, you can certainly take just the web design principles course. A lot of companies do like you to have situational awareness, so it just adds to your value if you do know HTML, even if you're not going to be using it every day. So it's just the completeness of having gone through an entire program that companies know and trust, and it just aids in getting the job or adding to your resume.
Awesome. Thank you. These are great questions, guys. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about PACE and why you would want to choose this program. As I kind of talked about a little bit before, Oregon State University is a land-grant institution, and our Division of Professional and Continuing Education is very proud of that name and takes a lot of time and is very careful with selecting our instructors. And as I'm sure you guys have seen, Kevin definitely knows his stuff. And this course is going to give you immediate returns. Not only that, but you're going to be able to walk out of this course and actually have a deliverable from it, not just know theory, but you're going to be able to point to something and show what you've been able to learn and manifest that by actually having something that you can demonstrate to people. So these courses are good for diversifying your skills and building out your resume, whether or not you've already had experience or if you're just starting out. And we aim to use state-of-the-art technology. Kevin kind of alluded to this as well. Kevin, is there anything that you want to talk about in terms of, you talked a little bit about those open sources and then also the Photoshop. Is there anything else that students should know about the technology or anything like that?
Yeah, I think it's important to know that we try to teach the most popular languages. So we teach PHP, although there's other ones out there. Part of that is because it's open source. That's probably why it's most popular. But there's not that heavy of an investment other than Photoshop, and we mentioned obviously there's a low-cost option for that. But I think the other thing to add around state-of-the-art technology is this is an evolving field, so it's very common that in between semesters I have to rewrite entire weeks or sometimes 2 or 3 weeks because things have evolved so much that there's more to add. So it's not that what you've learned before is irrelevant. It's just that 5, 6, 7 years ago, no one was really thinking of mobile websites, and all of a sudden everyone got a smartphone, and all of a sudden we had to add in, okay, how do you build a mobile site? What you learned before is still applicable, but we want to make sure you understand everything. So we're constantly adding stuff as technology innovates.
Awesome. We're getting one more question that came in. So how much web design knowledge do students get? Animation, sound, or what all is involved in that course?
In the HTML course?
In the web design course, sorry.
Yeah, so the web design course, it covers basically starting out at understanding the goals for your site. So how do you interview a client to understand that? How do you build technical and functional requirements? From that, how do you build user personas and storyboard a person's visit through the website? Then we understand the scope of the website. We learn about how to do information architecture. We learn how to build a wireframe for the site. We go into different user experience design patterns for a site. So how would you look at doing a navigation? How would you look at doing a web form? How would you look at doing thumbnails for a photo album? And then we go into color theory. What colors should you pick for your site? Then from the copy edit point of view, we give you text that's typically print-based, and we teach you how to chunk it so that it's actually going to be web-friendly. So it kind of runs the gambit of interviewing a client for the goals of the site all the way down to finishing the interior design with the color and the mood of the site.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kevin, and thanks everybody for joining us today. So if you are interested in these courses and you want to get started, as I mentioned earlier, the first course starts on June 12th, and you can register via our website, which is pace.oregonstate.edu. This show will be sent out to you as well, so you guys can access all of these links there. And webinar attendees are going to receive a 20% off coupon code that's good for any of the courses or for the certificate if you're interested in going through there. If you guys have questions about this certificate or about PACE in general, please feel free to reach out. Kevin is a great resource and knowledge content, and I'm the program manager for this certificate, and I'm happy to answer any questions and help guide you guys through the registration process or connect you however you may need. So of course, feel free to reach out. And thank you guys so much, and go Beavs. Thanks, Kevin.